One of the things that we're going to do, Lord willing, over the course of this series is to kind of have a moment before we preach that's called Missionary Stories from the Street. Kind of just everyday stories of people living out what we believe is a missional call. And most of the time, it's not going to be me. Most of the time, it's going to be one of you that I invite up here to share something from your lives, but it's the first week, and I will take the first one. They don't all have to be successes, by the way. Some of them can be failures, but it just kind of shows this attempt of us moving into mission together. So the story that I want to share with you to begin our time together today is a story that I call my Max story. And one of the things that I want you to know about this story is that it took place when I was not a pastor, okay? So this door was not open to me because I was a pastor. I was 23, 24. To kind of set the stage, I had just moved to Huntsville, Alabama, where Claire and I, we were just about to get married. I had just got a job at a Mexican restaurant as a waiter. And Claire wanted a piece of that financial pie, so she hitched her wagon to mine. We were really going places, you know? And so I was a waiter at a Mexican restaurant, and Claire was working for a nonprofit, and we were living in an apartment complex just outside of Huntsville, Alabama. And I believed this idea that God wanted to use his people to advance his kingdom, to make him known. But during that season of our lives, I became more convicted on what that's actually supposed to look like. So earlier on, I think in my journey, I thought really what I needed to do was just get the gospel to people. So get them like the contents of this book. And while I still believe that is important, I think there's more to it. And there's a verse that is authored by the Apostle Paul in his letter to the church at Thessalonica that communicates the more that I'm talking about. And it's 1 Thessalonians 2:8. And here's what Paul says. He says, "In the same way, we had a fond affection for you and were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you had become very dear to us." So the Apostle Paul is reflecting on his ministry, and he's saying, I didn't just teach you. I did teach you. I did talk with you about the gospel, but there was more to it than that. In addition to that, I shared with you not only the gospel, but my life with you as well. And so I began wrestling with what does it look like to really live on mission, even as a waiter at a Mexican restaurant. And so I started to just share my life with people. I mean, when I would go into the Mexican restaurant, I would pray, I think almost every single day before I went in, like, God, would you use me in this place for your glory? But we began to see our lives holistically as an opportunity to reach people and share what we believed was the best love that has ever existed on the planet, the love of Jesus. And so Claire and I decided one of the ways that you can best share your life with somebody is by opening the door of your home and letting people in. Like that communicates that we want to share our lives with you. And so in our apartment complex, we just started having people over to dinner frequently. They might be neighbors or coworkers. And one of the people that just became a staple in our life during this season was a guy named Max. And Max was a single guy going through a really bad divorce who lived above us. We were in our like early mid-20s. We were like 23, 24. He was probably like 32, so we kind of thought he was a little old, you know? And I'm 32 now, and it's not old. It's not old at all. And but we just grew to love this guy. Another interesting piece of information about Max was that Max was a self-professed atheist. And so he wasn't, like going to church with us or any of that, we just became really good friends, and we would have him over frequently, probably more than anyone else. And I've joked, he kind of became like our Kramer, where he'd just like, be in our lives. And we just had him over. Like, he would come over, he'd play games. Sometimes he'd bring a bottle of wine. We'd invite him over for dinner, and we just included him a lot. And I remember he had a son, and I remember going to his son's baseball games to communicate, like, we love you. And we just really tried to love Max well, and that became the primary emphasis of our relationship. But Max knew that we were believers. We didn't hide that. Additionally, we weren't trying to shove anything down his throat. But Max became curious. And I remember one day, he lived in the apartment above us, and I remember standing below, like in our grass, and him asking me if we could have like a faith conversation. Where he's like, hey, I have questions, and it's been a while now, so I don't remember the exact words that were exchanged, but what I remember is this idea of like, he wanted to have a conversation about faith with me in which he could ask some questions. And this was a self-professed atheist, and of course I was enthusiastic about that. And then we decided we were gonna just start up a Bible study in our apartment complex. And so we just welcomed people into our home. It was like a convergence of people that I invited from my work at the Mexican restaurant, people in our neighborhood, and people from church. And so it was this kind of convergence of our worlds coming together to study the Gospel of John. And Max showed up a couple times, like the atheist showing up to the Bible study. And I don't think he was there because we were studying the Bible. I think he was there because he felt loved by me, knew and trusted me, and was actually curious what I was gonna say, and also wanted to be in our home. And so in that season, like honestly though, most of the time, we were not talking faith. We were just hanging out. We were available. We loved Max, and I think we loved him well. So we never really, we would have like sort of spiritual conversation, but we never had the spiritual conversation. You know what I mean? And after Chloe was born, our first daughter, and Max came out to the hospital, and his son, Max Jr., we have this cute picture of his little boy holding Chloe right after she was born. But not long after Chloe was born, I was extended the invitation to come serve as a student pastor in Jacksonville, Florida, student and young adult pastor at a church in Jacksonville. And so we were about to relocate our family to Florida, and Max had asked about, this spiritual conversation, and he had been in the room and we'd sort of had stuff, but we really hadn't had the conversation. So I asked Max, said, hey Max, can we still have that conversation? You still up for that? He goes, I am. So we went out to this restaurant bar thing in Huntsville area, and for probably over an hour, Max, my self-professed atheist friend, and I had a conversation about Jesus. And it was the most thorough gospel conversation that I remember having with an individual in my entire life. And he was game for it. And here's how I opened that conversation. I said, Max, you're my friend. And because you're my friend, there's some stuff that I feel like I need to share with you. But if you think that everything I'm about to tell you is utter nonsense, I want you to know that you and we're still good. We're still friends. I feel like I need to share this with you though, because you're my friend. And the conversation didn't really feel forced. It felt beautiful and natural because of the relationship that Max and I had. And for probably over an hour, we had conversations about faith. And I started in Genesis with God creating the world. And I went through the fall, and I make my way to Jesus, and we just go through it. I think there was a little bit of dialogue back and forth. It was just this beautiful, remarkable conversation of faith with someone who did not believe, but who was very willing to hear what I had to say. So the conversation ends, and Max does not give his life to Jesus, and I didn't push him to in that moment, but it just felt like this really beautiful period of time. So then we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and we moved to like a little bit of a sketchy area, but even still, Max would bring out his family and come visit and come stay at our condo that we were renting in Jacksonville. And I think at that time, faith came up again. I mean, we're good friends. We talk about a variety of things, but faith was one of them. And I think it came up, and I think he said, I'm getting closer. I'm not there yet. And then life would continue to progress, and I got this job at this church called Edgewater Alliance. You might have heard of it. And so I'm here, and it's a weekday. I think I was upstairs in this building, so you all weren't here. It was like a Wednesday or something. And I get a text from Max. And the text from Max includes his baptism video. Yeah. And not only does it include his baptism video, it includes a video of what we at Edgewater Alliance call our grace story, where Max, before he's baptized, stands up in front of a congregation of Christians and shares his story of coming to faith, in which he mentions Claire and I. We're not the only people that were part of the story. There's other people part of the story, but we got to participate in that. And then I don't know if you guys know this, but occasionally we have hurricanes here. And there was a hurricane, and we decided not to stick around for it. So we went to Huntsville, Alabama, and I got to go to church with Max. And guess who served me communion? Max did. Yeah. So Max had become part of a local church, growing in his faith, ended up marrying this wonderful Christian gal and adopting her kids. And I mean, it was seriously just one of the most profoundly beautiful things in my life. There's more to the story that I'll probably share on the last Sunday of this series. But for now, it's seriously, as I think through ministry moments or things in my life, it's probably my favorite. And I wasn't a pastor. And so here's one of the things that I want you to hear loud and clear from the onset of our series, Surprise the World. That this kind of thing, we believe, is for everyone who professes the name of Jesus. That all followers of Jesus get to participate and be in the game. And there wasn't anything that was exceptionally difficult about how we invested in the life of Max. We really loved him. We opened up our home. We invited him in. We played board games. We went to his son's baseball game. We just spent a lot of time loving Max. And I think for him, that was strange. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but in the world today, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of people that are really interested in just genuinely, no strings attached, taking interest in and loving other people. But Christians get to do that. That's part of the biblical call on the lives of followers of Jesus. And what I would submit to you is this kind of kingdom life that isn't profoundly complex or confusing. It's actually really simple, but it is to be the norm, not the exception. That according to the scriptures, that we follow a missional God who invites his people to be on mission with him. And here's what I think, that a life connected to Jesus, marked by mission, is the kind of life that attracts attention as it shines brightly in a dark world.